Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 67th episode of the Diverse Minds podcast. And on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the very popular topic of boards and why, if you're an employer, a charity, a school, you need to talk about diversifying them. And if you're listening to this as an individual, why you need to join one or why you might like to join one to broaden the thought pool. Now, board diversity and discussion about it is not a new thing. It's been a topic that's been discussed for many, many years. And with the recent increase in interest in the topic, it's resurfaced again, particularly around Black Lives Matter and boardroom representation. And I was asked about this and quoted in the Financier Worldwide magazine's online cover story, this in the December edition. And you can read more about this in the show notes. And it's all about board diversity. A 2020 report by the Parker Review Committee, which looks at ethnic diversity on boards, it was entitled Enriching Business Leadership, explored the ethnic diversity of UK boards, and they do this every few years. And for this report, it revealed that as of 31st December 2019, so last year, 37% of companies surveyed in the FTSE 100 and 69% of the FTSE 250 companies have not met their target of at least one and only one global majority or director of colour on their board. In addition, only 6.8% of all FTSE 350 companies had directors of colour or people who were global majority on their boards. And actually, what was interesting is that 8 companies accounted for nearly 25% of those that do. So those that are doing it really well, or they're putting their heart into it, and others have not met that target. So in effect, it is stark. And don't forget, it's not just about corporate boards that I'm talking about today, but charity boards, school governor boards, and other non-exec roles like the NHS, for example. And I think that boardrooms do often lack diversity in the broadest sense. We know that there's been a lot of work and talk done by the 30% Club, who aim to get 30% of women on corporate boards. And that's great, but what about women? But these tend to be women from similar social backgrounds, educational experiences, and majority of them are white British. So this doesn't necessarily mean it's a more diverse board. Yes, you might have more diversity in the room, but thinking about thought diversity in terms of socioeconomic background, in terms of diaspora thinking and communities and experience is often lacking and not there. And in general, charity boards are less diverse than the general public, and they also tend not to reflect the communities they serve. And according to Taken on Trust research by the Charity Commission, again, that figure of only 8% of trustees are from global majority backgrounds compared with 14% of the UK population as of the 2011 census. And I think that figure is probably between around 16% UK-wide, but I'm taking an educated guess there. 7 out of 10 trustees are men, which actually really surprised me. And the median age of a charity trustee is 61 years of age. So that's fascinating. And I was having a conversation with a charity organisation who are doing some race equality work, and they were talking to me about the lack of age diversity of their board and how it was a real struggle to get young people on their board, despite the fact that they were actually a charity aimed at younger people. And the Charity Commission also estimates that only 0.5% of the trustee population is made up of 18 to 24-year-olds, which reflects the kind of story that I've just shared with you. And this is data based on the public register of trustees held by the Charity Commission. So this only collects limited demographic information. So there are other elements that aren't captured in this, such as religion and potentially sexual orientation. So this is also exacerbated by the fact that, according to this report, that 81% of charities recruit for trustees by word of mouth and personal recommendation. So yes, that's good in some senses, but what happens then? We all tend to have our tribe, don't we? People that are from similar backgrounds to us, that we know from particular jobs, and therefore the likelihood is that we tend to find people in our own image or who are more like us in some way. Then if we start to think about school governors, well, this is from the National Governance Association, and they do reports on this. And they've got an initiative called Inspiring the Future, which is how I became a school governor for a period of 3 years. And in relation to those stats, 94% of school governors and trustees identify as white, 1% as black, which is absolutely shocking, 2% as Asian, and 1% as being of mixed or multiple heritage, which compares to a pupil population where 73% of school pupils are white, 6% are black, 12% are Asian, and 6% are of mixed or multiple heritage. So that's according to the annual school governance survey. And this survey also found that young people, so they said people aged under the age of 40, are underrepresented with a higher proportion of volunteers aged 70 or over at 14% than there are aged under 40, which was only 11%, which actually really shocks me because when I became a school governor, I was 35. So I didn't think of it as that young, really. And considering what schools do, I think it's really important to have that representative age range. So why do you need to care about this topic? And I think one of the key concerns from senior executives or things that we hear, and I realised that when I first started talking about boards was in 2018 in a very different climate to the one that we're in now, but there is still a skill shortage in terms of having representation. And this number is only going to increase. So yes, we're going to have more people who are unemployed for a period of time. We need to be harnessing those skills, making sure that they feel that they can add value, and also giving people opportunities. And some board positions, non-execs are paid, but a majority aren't. However, this is still a way to use someone's skills and to enable them to build confidence if they're out of work for a period of time and to make those connections. And we have skills gaps. So often when you join a board, you will complete a skills matrix and there are always some skills missing. And so I think this is a way to address some of that. And akin to staff recruitment, board makeup and diversity needs to reflect the people it serves. Look at those stats I just shared about schools and pupils versus governors. I find diversity of people equates to depth and breadth of insight, perspective, communication skills, and life experience. It also reduces groupthink. So let's go along with this way of thinking because it's the way we've all done it. And it reflects what's going on outside the boardroom. And every single organisation needs that. I mean, it's interesting that Norway still leads the way in terms of board gender diversity with corporate boards, with 42% of women on corporate boards. And this is as a result of quotas being introduced in 2003. And quotas are seen as extremely controversial in the UK. Personally, and I know many of you might disagree with me when I say that, I think there is a place for quotas because things are not changing quickly enough. That doesn't mean that people don't meet a standard. For me, it means, particularly for board positions, that you're choosing from a smaller range of people, but you're still choosing the person that you think has the right skills and can bring what you need to the board from a smaller shortlist. And non-exec and trustee roles have big parts to play in the life of all organisations. They have to develop long-term strategies, manage risks, and be accountable, oversee finances, and look for opportunities. And this requires a broad understanding and a hive mind way of working. And also on a flip side, a less diverse board means that you're less likely to have those challenging scrutiny type conversations. And it can really result in a lack of understanding and inability to recognise the challenges that are coming, the challenges that you need to be ready for, and also new opportunities brought about by rapid change. And I think COVID-19 has really been testament to this. And this is something that Linda Akutagawa, President and Chief Executive of the Leadership Executive for Asian Pacific's LEAP and Chair of the Alliance for Board Diversity, talks about. And she says that we really need to disrupt groupthink, and an inability to discern unconscious bias, acceptance of conventional wisdom, and trust in a narrow set of ideas really impedes what boards can do. So I was first a trustee actually at the age of 21 for a wonderful community organisation called the Burley Lodge Community Centre, and I'm still in touch with the chief exec there, Tara Kayani. And this comes about from me having volunteered as a student, and the volunteer coordinator there encouraged me to apply for the board position. So often we do need those champions and people to help us. And then there was a lull in my boardroom activities due to building my career. And the thought of wanting to contribute and be on a board never really went away. And I always wanted to be a school governor, but never had the time or capacity. And I just wanted to be a different part of team, have strategic overview and insight into a bigger picture, something that I wasn't always able to do in my day job. We know about the politics. We know that who gets information and who's given information. And I was commuting long hours, so I just wouldn't have been able to commit to the meetings. So when I started running my own business, that changed and I was able to find the time and be more flexible about things. I mean, I knew some of the stats. I think reflecting them here in this podcast episode again has really shone a light as to how things have not really changed. It's been absolutely glacial since 2018, and particularly the low numbers of global majority Black women and the lack of representation, which in effect had a negative outcome on, has a negative outcome on customer, client, user experience, and particularly thinking about school and school curriculums. Now, of course, school governors don't set the curriculum, but they can have input into thinking about bigger picture, particularly now with things like PSHE and the opportunities and talking about, things that are tangential but complementary to the curriculum in a different way. And I felt it was also, an opportunity to use what I'd learned over the last 16 years in higher education and bring it into, or get the thinking, or to have those discussions about how students can start to think about higher education earlier. So if you're an individual listening to this and you think, maybe I should be thinking about this, I've put together some tips to consider if you want to join a board. I think one of the things is, and this resonates with last week's podcast episode about why training isn't a panacea, but thinking about your why. So what motivates you to be part of a board? What kind of organisation would you like to contribute to? Because there's so much choice. And think about the skills that you have both personally and professionally that you can contribute. And yesterday I was having a coaching conversation with someone who wanted to go into comms, and she said to me, but I'm really concerned that I don't have the skills. And it was about asking the question, well, how else could you gain the skills that isn't in a job? And she came up with this idea of volunteering for a charity that needs someone to help with communications. So you don't have to be perfect at it, and volunteering. So remember those things that you have in your personal life as well as your professional life that you can then contribute into a board level area. And, when you're thinking about the organisation, just think about also your values and vision, what you want to do, and is there a match? And most likely, if there's an opportunity, you will have an interview. And remember, that's a two-way process for you to find out more. I think fourthly, it's really important for you to be clear about how much time you can commit, because I think the thing with board roles is there is more to it than meets the eye. So yes, it could be just reading the papers and contributing, but you'll find that there'll be subcommittees, there'll be other things to get involved with, and there'll be sub-projects. And it's really important that you are clear about that. So whatever the time commitment is, I would say always add an hour or two to that because of things that grow and develop as you go along. And fifthly, be prepared to get out of your comfort zone. It isn't always an easy thing to do. And, working with other trustees, they might not have the same vision and values as you, working with other board members, but just be prepared to get out of that comfort zone, learn new things. You might sit at your first couple of board meetings and think, I don't know what is going on. I don't know what these acronyms mean. And that's okay. That's completely normal. And make sure that you get a really good induction process as part of that journey. And if you think, well, I don't really know where to start, ask people about vacancies, start sharing your vision. Say, I'm thinking about joining a board. Have you been on any boards? I'm thinking about becoming a trustee, or I'd really like to know more. Do you know where I could, who I could talk to? And it is amazing what people will come back with. And in some cases, it may not be possible going straight into being a non-executive director for a FTSE 100 company, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it. So plan your steps, and where could you go first? So could you try a tech startup company that needs some input, a foundation arm of a FTSE 100 company, maybe a school that's got connection or that's sponsored, elements are sponsored by, academies are sponsored by various companies now, or a public appointment first. So you can have a look at sort of public appointments for the public sector. And don't be put off by rejection. So, it happened to me a lot. I applied for so many board positions, and I was, in fact, even part of a program that worked with women of colour about 2009, 10 and 11 to gear them up for board positions. I didn't get anything through that. It took me a long time afterwards, but I think it's to keep going with that and to try and get feedback. But remember that you also know yourself the best. So take on the feedback that's useful to you, unhook from the criticism and unhook from the praise. So take the useful elements, but don't feel that that's based on you. And, use your cultural capital to its maximum advantage. That's something, particularly if you're from a global majority Black background, that's not something that a lot of board members have. So use that, and you will absolutely have that cultural capital. And then finally, just if when you do get that board position, be prepared for a potentially bumpy ride. pull your sleeves up and get stuck in, but make sure you have a solid induction, as I mentioned earlier, and know your duties and about the relevant legislation according to the board that you're on. Also be very mindful of the robustness of policies. If you do need to carry out things like grievances, I would ask that question as well, or such like, if the senior management may not like it. So I have found myself in that position. So make sure that you have backup from other board members, or have a discussion about commissioning it externally and the potential conflict of interest, particularly in the school environment. This is a very, very sensitive and painful area for a lot of senior leadership teams. And for organisations, so the first thing I would say is, you're trying to diversify your board. You need to think about the criteria differently. So yes, you do need a skills matrix, but do those skills need to be gained from a corporate job for 20 years? Do entire boards have to be made up of people who've got 25 years experience in a particular environment? I think it's really crucial that you designate a group of people, probably the existing board, but you also might want to invite some external members. And if they do pay, in terms of scrutiny, if they do charge, then pay them for their time to reach out and do that homework and place those adverts in different places. I would also say something that I go on about even before we were working virtually was to have virtual open days and explain the process. So this is what the board do, meet some board members. This is what we would expect from an application. These are the types of questions we'll be asking. Remember, this is a two-way process. If you do get called for an interview, these are the kinds of things that we would expect to discuss. Because I think that's the thing. People often don't know what's involved. They feel nervous. They might feel judged. They might have had their fingers burnt by applying for many, many jobs and think, oh, well, why would I set myself up for failure again? I think if you can do this and be really clear, it builds that trust from the offset, and you're going to be managing expectations, but also be understanding maybe what the challenges are for potential trustee members or board members, and how you can remove or change those barriers. Link in with school leavers programs and really challenge what's viewed as the ideal person for the board. I mean, look at the age diversity. It's not great, is it, by a long stretch of the imagination, and we're missing out. And, our ideal person will be shaped by the experience and the experiences we've had on the people that we currently see on boards, or who do we expect in some quite unexpected ways. So have that conversation with the existing board and really thrash some of that out. And if you're listening to this and you're part of a charity, why not think about beneficiaries, people that benefit from your charity, or people with the life experience related to the particular cause? The same with schools. Think about maybe how you phrase this, but potential governors that really didn't have a good time at school, that will be able to advise you on pupils that are seen as difficult, or disciplinary methods. You want to change detention systems. Those are the kind of go-to people. And equally with boards, with executive boards, you want people who have different experiences, and really getting those what is often perceived as difficult conversations out in the open. Consider using specialist job boards, in particular specific job boards around age, around racial diversity, LGBTQI+. LGBT out is one example of that. Think about organising board meetings in an accessible way, and those interviews as well, and that are convenient for all. Think about people's caring responsibilities. Let's say you want more parents or guardians or carers on your board. That's another thing, particularly if you work with, or you want to work with, looked after children, and understanding the barriers. And you want to work with people potentially who are foster carers or who care for children who are in care. Think about that. So think about how you reimburse expenses such as travel care and childcare. If we are face-to-face, how could you provide those childcare services? That could be a conversation you're having now, ready for when we are back to face-to-face. Think about accessibility online, so how people can access the meetings. You having closed captions. How are you transcribing meetings so that people don't miss out on things if they've got hearing impairments or they're from the deaf community? Provide translators or sign language interpreters, all of these things if that's what people need and use. To keep monitoring that diversity as well, so the different representation that's at the table. So it's not a one and done. People come, people go, people leave boards. So think about those as a living, breathing thing, and it's not a one and done. And establish those positive working relationships. So in between board meetings as well, how are people going to get to know each other? How do we know people's backgrounds? Now, you don't want to put people in a place where they're disclosing the private into the public, but what are the ways in which we can start to understand the current picture that we have in the board? Because there are things you might know about people's background in terms of understanding, and they're things that you might not know. And of course, think about chairing as well. So chairs, of course, play a really crucial role on any board, and making sure that they've had the adequate training, that they understand what's going on, that people have got the space in meetings to raise their views, that this isn't just clipped on to the AOB. It could be that you want one-to-one discussions about this before you really start to delve into the recruitment strategy, or look at the existing strategies and see how this is very much integral part of it. Between formal meetings, how can people catch up? And if they don't feel able to make full contribution, or they're new, how they can gradually be supported and use their skills and experience. So I hope that's given you a good sense of how to manage and how to think about inclusivity on boards, whether you're someone who's thinking about being part of a board, or whether you're an organisation listening to this thinking we really have to do something about our board. Because this has been an ongoing discussion for at least 10 years. And the reality is we really shouldn't be having these conversations, as in my opinion, it's not rocket science to solve. It just needs consideration around the best way to do it. The pressure has been on for some time, so why haven't boards? Why haven't they sat up with more speed? I'd also like to mention Samuel Kasumu, who runs Inclusive Boards, so inclusiveboards.co.uk, as an example. So he puts people together, so diverse talent on boards that have opportunities. So if boards do want diverse talents, there are elegant solutions to find people. And I hope it will evolve in the sense that this will be a core part of strategies, and genuine balance will be thought about. And pressures, the kind of pressure, well, that depends on the business or the organisation and what consumers, clients, staff, students, beneficiaries expect. That may intensify, it may sort of wane, but why wait? The time really is now. So get on boards, and remember, this is why diversifying boards matters and why you need to. So I really hope this has been a useful episode to you, and I've included some resources for you in the show notes. The cover story entitled Time for Change, Diversity Dynamics in the Boardroom for Financier Worldwide online magazine. My blog post from 2018, Get on Board, Why Diversity Matters. Links to school governor boards, charity boards and inclusive boards if you're interested in finding out more. And I really hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts if you enjoyed the show. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.